Well, the three candidates running for sheriff of San Diego County squared off in a debate on Friday. Sheriff Bill Gore, Jim Duffy, and Jay LeSueur are the candidates on the June primary ballot. If re-elected, well, I should say if elected, Mr. Gore promises to continue maintaining the excellence of the department that he was set. He took over for Sheriff Bill Collender. Duffy, son of the late Sheriff Jim Duffy, says the department is too top-heavy and that more resources should be used to help deputies on the front lines. Former State Assemblyman Jay LeSueur says that he would model his department after Maricopa County, where the sheriff is known as the toughest sheriff in America. LeSueur also wants to use inmates for fire prevention duties. The winner of the election will oversee a department with more than 4,000 employees, including 2,300 sworn personnel, and an annual budget of over $1 billion. All right, so the big debate was on Friday, and the moderator is right here. John Dadian joins us this morning. I hesitated there about how that lead-in was written, partially because Bill Gore was not elected, so he can't be re-elected. I want to be very clear about that. He was appointed by Mr. Collender, his hand-picked successor, by Sheriff Collender, or by the supervisors, I should say. By the supervisors, but he was the sheriff's pick. And so he has not been elected yet. And there was a lot of debate about that being allowed to happen in the first place, because in a race like this, the incumbent is pretty tough to beat.
Absolutely. The power of the incumbency is very important in a race like this. It's an interesting little misnomer. I've heard some other debates where they've introduced him as the interim sheriff or the acting sheriff. Right. He is the sheriff.
He is the sheriff.
He is the sheriff, period. The men of the Board of Supervisors voted. The difference, the only slight difference is on the ballot designation, sometimes it's extremely important. And because of state law, he does have to use the word appointed when it's on the ballot. So he will be there as appointed sheriff.
But in terms of the general public, isn't it an awfully tough nut to crack in an election like this? I mean, they see the sheriff's department. Most folks don't have an intimate knowledge of the inner workings. They call 911, the sheriff shows up. They're pretty happy.
Of course, that's absolutely true in any of the normal sense. Now, I won't say this is a perfect storm, but of course what has happened is the tragedy of the Chelsea King incident in the last couple months. And you've had Sheriff Gore on national TV all over, and he's conducted himself very well. Of course, his department led the investigation, et cetera. So, of course, that has absolutely had an impact on this race.
But these other two men, very qualified. We mentioned Jay LeSueur, and we mentioned him as a former assemblyman. That was a small part of his career compared to his law enforcement career, and in fact was the undersheriff here in San Diego.
He was a career in the sheriff's department and rose to the level of undersheriff, which is the number 2, right under the sheriff, and specifically it is the highest appointed position in the sheriff's department, so absolutely.
And Jim Duffy? Certainly qualified as well, if you just look at law enforcement experience.
Highly qualified, worked for several other departments, but then went to the sheriff's department for the bulk of his career. Of course, what is resonating in the polls is the name ID of his father, who was sheriff for many years here in this county.
And as you research that actually is carrying quite a bit of weight, is it not?
It is, and I'm a little surprised about that because, again, as we all know, the basic demographics, there's a lot of new voters here. He hasn't been sheriff for quite a while, et cetera, but it still resonated. That Duffy name is really a big plus for Jim Duffy.
So if Sheriff Gore says, I think the department's running pretty well, I'm going to leave it kind of the way it is, how do the other two candidates break through and say, these are the changes I would make? And here, John Q. Public is why I think these changes are important.
Well, what happened on the debate Friday, which is very interesting, today, to use campaign lingo, we're at E-42. That's how many days are left before the election. So Jim Duffy really did make some very good points and did draw a distinction, and they were good. They were pretty solid points. It's interesting. Jay LeSueur tried to call this a sanctuary county, and Bill Gore did something which I thought was brilliant. He picked out in the audience a sheriff's deputy who's a Duffy supporter, not one of his supporters, and said, you're out in the field. You've said publicly this isn't sanctuary county. And all the TV cameras panned on that deputy and nodded, said that sheriff was right. So he kind of turned that around against LeSueur. But they all made very good points. The way that I phrase it is what happened since we are 42 days out on the election. The gloves came off. The brass knuckles haven't gone on yet, but the gloves came off Friday. You'll see the brass knuckles in the last probably 30 days of the campaign.
Is there any information out there to kind of give you an indication who's in a clear lead right now? Is there a clear leader? Or
Again, there's certainly some internal polls out there, but I don't believe polls. I certainly don't believe in 40 days out. So it's very interesting. Keep in mind what the goal is or the strategy of all the campaigns. This is a nonpartisan runoff type system. If anybody gets 50% plus one vote in June, it's over. And that person will be sworn in the following January. If nobody gets that level, the top two will continue on until November.
And I imagine getting the message out is going to be extremely important, so fundraising would have to be important. Who's doing better in that area?
Well, Bill Gore and Jim Duffy are both doing extremely well. Jay Lurso is surprising people. It doesn't look like he's doing as well as people expected, but it's been a little while since the last reporting period, so we just don't know. It's the oldest rule in politics. You need to have a good message, which all three do, but you do need the resources to get the message out.
Okay, John Dadian, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for coming in, and as this one gets closer, we'll talk about it more. Come back and see us.
Very good.
Fantastic. Thanks. All right, for more information, you go to san diego6.com, you click on Hot Topics.